Great.
There we go. Now we're live. There we go.
Awesome. So thank you for watching this podcast and tuning in. This is covering IoT data security. So we're going to be talking about a number of topics, including agricultural, malware, botnets, and a general description of data security. So to start us off, Cole Sandheim will be talking to us about malware and IoT devices.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much. So, as we all know, IoT devices are becoming a lot more popular, a lot more widespread in our world today, right? So with these systems becoming more widespread, so too does the existence of malicious software, or malware, that will attempt to exploit these devices. In the last few years, malware attacks on IoT devices have increased a lot. In 2021, 1.5 billion attacks were reported on specifically IoT devices, which is a drastic increase from the year before, 2020, which was 639 million.
Wow. Okay.
Kind of a big increase, right?
Yeah, that's huge. Holy.
So specifically when it comes to IoT malware, they're used to perform a variety of attacks, the most common of which are distributed denial of service attacks, DDoS, port scanning for possible entry, and brute force attacks, basically. Those are the most commonly reported ones. There are many different families of IoT malware. Some popular ones that I was researching: Bashlight, Mira, and Linux.darlulz. I'm probably saying that wrong, but I only ever read it. These examples, the most common type of these malware, are actually used to create botnets, which Raymond will go more in depth about. Bashlight targets Linux-based systems to perform a distributed denial of service attack by exploiting a flaw in the bash shell. It is estimated currently that 1 million devices have been infected in 2021.
Wow.
Which is kind of a lot if you're creating a botnet.
A little bit concerning.
Mira targets IoT devices to create a botnet by scanning for IP addresses and attempting to brute force its way in using common default usernames and passwords for known devices. And Linux.darlulz is a worm which targets Linux embedded systems, exploiting a PHP vulnerability. Now, all of these malware rely on vulnerabilities, which for the most part can be mitigated. For one, you got to ensure that your devices do not use default usernames or passwords. You change it. Basic password security is kind of an important thing in any system, including IoT systems. Also, when possible, two-factor authentication goes a very, very long way.
100%.
For two, when people are designing, like for us, if we're going to be designing an IoT system, data encryption is very often overlooked, apparently, in my research. That most of the data that is being sent to IoT portals from IoT devices tends not to be encrypted and is thus open to data theft, basically. So when designing IoT systems, make sure encryption is a very high priority. And three, again, basic network security: close any unused ports, limit internet connectivity wherever possible, just general normal security. However, these steps are not 100% foolproof. Time goes on and these malicious programmers will create malware that becomes more and more sophisticated. And new vulnerabilities are discovered that, we didn't consider before, right? Like, who knows what could be discovered in the next month even. So, malware analysis is very important for preventing future attacks, right? Like, you got to understand how the malware works. So, both in developing malware and performing malware analysis is incredibly difficult on IoT systems. due to the wide range of differences there are between IoT systems and their architecture. Because IoT systems don't use any kind of unified architecture. There's tons of different types of architecture.
It's all over
out
the
there for
board.
them. Exactly. So one system is completely different from another, so a malware could easily infect that one and be completely useless in the other. And if you're analyzing it in the other, what are you going to do, right?
Mhm.
So dynamic analysis, as we may know, consists of monitoring the executable functions of a program while running and attempt to detect any abnormal behavior. Besides any regular issues that are faced when performing dynamic analysis, there are specific limitations that are present when analyzing possible infected IoT and embedded systems. Such as, it is difficult to properly sandbox an infected embedded system, as it can often require the whole network to be able to properly function, which would allow the malware to spread. Diverse architectures, as we discussed, presently systems mean that malware can behave differently or not at all on different systems. And two, resource constraints within the embedded systems mean that it is very difficult to run the required software to debug and analyze the software within the system. And to get around these restrictions, you can create a whole new system specifically to analyze the malware, but malware programmers are becoming very intelligent and design their malware to be able to detect when it is running in an isolated sandbox system,
That's right.
not an actual system,
Yep.
right? So, the malware will attempt to hide and not perform their malicious functions, making it next to impossible to perform the analysis. So in that way, when you're analyzing IoT malware, dynamic analysis is incredibly hard to do. Static analysis, on the other hand, works a lot better. You can use static analysis to analyze the malware without it running. Using this method, you can explore all paths of execution that are possible in a malware sample without necessarily having to consider the differences in the system's architecture. Static analysis can provide knowledge on opcode, strings, and file structure to help determine if a binary file is malicious or not. However, this basic method of analysis is still limited in its functionality. Ideally, you want to be able to perform dynamic analysis, but it's not super possible with IoT systems. And so people have been developing new methods of malware analysis.
Right.
The one that I was looking at was called graph-based analysis.
Okay.
And in my research, which I did for a while, I still cannot wrap my head around how it works.
It's not complicated.
It is
Sounds
very
complicated.
very complicated. But from what I read, that seems to be the kind of the general best way. Like, being able to detect and quarantine malware with a 99.99% accuracy.
Okay.
As far as I understand it, it just uses previous data gathered from malware attacks to create a graph, which it can then check against current attacks, but the specifics of it are very, very complicated and a bit outside of my current capabilities.
Well, hey, you already know more about that than me.
Yeah.
So I think you're doing a great job.
But yeah, so when it comes to malware in IoT systems, it is a very, very big deal as they are becoming more and more targeted. So developing new ways of malware analysis is very important. Moral of the story here.
100%. I want to ask you. So you were saying that some of the challenges with analyzing malware came from the dynamic aspect, because
Yes.
these are embedded systems, or they're systems that are not as we could say frequently used, so they don't have a whole lot of support in this regard for like.
I mean, yeah, they don't have a whole lot of support, but more it's just that with most embedded systems, they have a very limited memory and very limited storage. So trying to run, it'd be impossible to run, say, Ghidra that we've used
Mhm.
in an embedded system. It just wouldn't work. There's
It's
no
just not going to work.
Exactly. So
Makes
you have to
sense.
take the malware sample out of the embedded system into a system that can actually run the software, but then the malware can detect that it's not in an actual system and will be deactivated, basically,
Very cool.
making dynamic analysis next to impossible.
Makes sense. Awesome. Thank you for touching on that. Does anyone have any additional questions for Cole before we keep going?
Not quite. That was very extensive. I'm
That was
already
great.
speechless.
I mean, thanks.
Great job.
That was a lot deeper than I expected you to do.
Yeah, it's actually
It was
been
interesting. Went down a rabbit hole. What can I say?
Yeah, like that rabbit hole was really massive. It's just like, what question I ask? You already covered it.
exactly.
Right?
Fantastic.
So,
Yeah,
I guess we move on then, right?
We move on.
for sure.
Kai,
Rian,
I
you're
guess?
next, right? Oh no, Kai,
No,
right?
Kai,
yeah,
what-
next.
yeah.
So Kai, I believe you're going to talk to us about IoT botnets.
Yes. Can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Recently, I have read some articles about IoT botnet. I would like to share with you how IoT botnet reflect the latest trend of IoT security. Firstly, I will tell you what botnet is and its evolution. Secondly, I will tell you why IoT devices becomes the most popular targets of Botmaster. I will illustrate how the characteristics of IoT devices attract the hackers. Lastly, I will tell you some solution to mitigate the problem. Okay, let's start with the simple definition of botnet. Botnet comes from the word robot and network. It is a number of internet connected devices which are compromised and controlled by the hacker. We call such compromised device as bots and the owner of the botnet as botmaster. Botmaster can control botnets using command and control software. Botnets can be used to perform DDoS attack, steal data, and send spam. There is an obvious evolution in botnets in these few years. The trend is shifting from the traditional botnet to IoT botnet. Traditional botnets is a collection of compromised computers and servers. The size of them is usually thousands or tens of thousands of devices. But in IoT botnets, they are collected compromised IoT devices such as cameras, routers, wearables, and sensors. The size of IoT botnets is typically hundreds of thousands of compromised devices, which is 10 times of the traditional botnet.
Oh,
Very crazy.
It's scary.
oh, that is
Very, very
bad. No.
bad
Jeez.
news for us, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it comes with the next question. Why IoT botnets or IoT device becomes the more popular targets of Botmaster? The simple answer is that the characteristics of IoT devices are very, very attractive to the Botmaster. Have a quick overview of the related characteristics of IoT devices. First, IoT devices are always on. They are 24/7 connected to the internet, while our home computer may not. Secondly, IoT devices may have relatively lower computation power. But there are exceptions, such as cameras, routers. They have enough computation powers and bandwidth so that they can perform more aggressive attacks. So, for example, DDoS attack or sense spam and more. They have enough computation power.
Right.
Lastly, the fact is that IoT devices are usually less secured, as Ko already said.
Exactly.
Yeah, as you know, they usually don't have endpoint security software installed, low antivirus, low Windows defenders. I think all of you already know that how difficult to hack a Windows 10, the latest one, with defenders running. It is much more difficult, but for a IoT device, it is much more easy. It is also a common situation that there may be low software update provided by the manufacturer, or the users never apply them. If you install your device, you never try to check the latest update or download or apply to your devices. You won't.
No, you're just not going to do it. It's
So another issue is that already mentioned, users may use default password, and some other user may share a common password between all their devices. You should understand the feeling of the user. If you need to manage hundreds of devices, can you manage hundreds of different passwords? No, you don't. So they simply share a single password. So when a hacker successfully crack one password, he can control all the related devices.
yeah, that's all he needs.
Yes.
One password rules all.
Yeah. Rule the world.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Password is password. The last one is the cost issue. Security scan may be skipped in the development cycle to catch the deadline. Yeah, we all catch the deadline of assignment, and, and the developer also catch their deadline to develop their product. IoT device also usually have minimal features using a minimal OS. They trim all the unnecessary module. For example, there is even no system log for chasing an attack happened. So the hacker even don't worry about he may leave some footprint for chasing. They don't worry. So as a very short conclusion, the reason is those devices are less secure. They are 24/7 connected, and they are powerful enough to perform aggressive attack. These three reasons give very attractive to the hacker. It is obvious that it is a very good investment to compromise IoT devices instead of traditional computer. In the botnet evolution, technology and market trends also play an important role. They are the DDoS as a service market and cryptocurrency mining. Yes, it is very crazy. It is very crazy that a marketplace is already developed to offer DDoS attack as a service. But master offer that service to perform DDoS attack for a fee. Another is the cryptojacking malware becomes popular. They are unauthorized software running in victim devices to mine cryptocurrency for the hackers. These two new funding opportunities motivated the botmaster to build their botnet more aggressively. It is why IoT botnets, the size is so big, such as the cameras, becomes the most popular targets of the botmaster. They have enough computational power to run cryptocurrency mining software and run 24/7. It is very attractive, very good investment.
Very.
Yeah, it sounds.
Yeah.
It's
Okay. The last question is how to mitigate the problem. There is a device level and a level level. In device level, there are many things that the manufacturer can do. They can add security features. They can provide or even enforce security patch. They can provide more security training to IoT developers. But all this require the market pressure to push them to invest. Otherwise, the market will change. For device user, the first principle is please don't use default password.
please don't do that.
Like, number one.
No, just everything. Just don't use default. You'll be fine.
Just make
That's
all
the
your
one
passwords
rule that we
password.
follow every time.
Yeah, and don't share a common password between devices. There are some solutions in the market. There are some password management solutions in the market to help industrial users to deploy their device with individual password, which help a lot. User should enable the security features and apply security patch. They are the things that we can do in device level. If there is security features limitation in the device level, there is another solution, which is in the level. Users should enable proper filtering rules and whitelisting in their network architecture. For example, apply the filtering rules and whitelisting in their router, in their proxy, or firewall. It could help to reduce the problem. Yeah, that's all I prepared today.
That's great. Thank you.
Great.
Awesome.
Great.
Quick question. So would you say that this trend in targeting IoT systems is going to continue into the future? Like it's going to become the new standard, basically?
Yes, because the hackers is try to get the easy target.
Yeah,
And
sorry, you don't think that that's going to like die out anytime soon? That's going to like continue?
I think so until the market shift to another side, the manufacturer would like to invest more to the security features, and the public education may help to shift.
Very cool.
It definitely seems like that would be the trend, considering how unsecure these devices are.
Yeah,
It's scary.
Especially, I guess
A little bit, yeah.
Well, what Cole said, like if everything is transmitted in like plain text, right? You're not encrypting your traffic. It's like anybody with the right tools and the right equipment can just pick it up, and that's very scary.
Very interesting that you pointed it out. That I did think about these devices being used for DDoS attacks, but I didn't even think about them being used for cryptojacking. I didn't know that was possible. You could do that with a camera. That's terrifying. That's crazy.
Wait, with a camera?
I mean, yeah, if they have a processor, why not?
Why not?
Okay. You got me sold.
It's not going to have a whole lot of output, a single device, but you get enough of them, and you can probably make a pretty good investment there. we're not advocating doing that. Just to clarify that.
Totally don't have a botnet currently set up. That's definitely not a thing that exists.
What? Definitely not
Do
going to
not
mine.
look at that. No.
We don't have a secret server farm sitting somewhere.
No, absolutely
Nope.
not.
Sure?
Absolutely not.
100%.
Pretty big.
I think he means that he have a he repurposed his smart device to do cryptocurrency mining.
Yeah.
But who
Exactly.
doesn't
own
have
devices.
smart devices in their house? Like,
I don't.
you don't?
Like smart devices? I don't think so.
I
No.
don't think so.
Like, not a Google
No
Home?
TV or
Nope,
smart
no
TV,
Google Home.
I think.
Not an Alexa?
Nope, no Alexa.
Even-
Have a regular TV with a cable box attached to it.
Okay. Smart thermostats?
Nope,
Do we have a
nope,
router?
regular old thermostat.
Impressive. Yeah.
Okay.
IoT free.
Okay, cool.
I'm safe. I'm safe.
Very
All
concerned about the IoT security. So, Kai, is there any other additional questions we have for Kai, or should we start moving on to the next part?
I think I'm good.
No, I think I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Kai,
Let's
for talking about this on botnet security. So, I will touch on agricultural IoT, which I find super interesting. I actually love this.
Yep. I
So,
can see that.
the world seems to be tending towards smart farming, which is really interesting because traditionally farmers had to, tend to their crops themselves manually.
Yep.
It was manual labor. It included not just your vegetables, your wheat, but also your cattle, your sheep, any livestock that you had. And the interesting thing about precision agriculture is that it solves many of these problems that farmers had and gave them more opportunity to end up producing more crops. There are 3 types of platforms for precision agriculture, and this includes stationary, aerial, and ground-based mobile, which is pretty cool. So I didn't even know the aerial existed.
Aerial farming.
Yeah. So there's I haven't looked too much into the aerial aspect, but I'm imagining it had something to do with drones, perhaps watering, or just surveying. All 3 of these devices rely on application programming interfaces, so APIs.
Okay.
So almost, as has been mentioned before, almost all of these IoT devices are connected to the internet. And because of this connection, they are vulnerable. They don't always have these local area networks where they're consolidated and isolated. They have access to the open internet. So this data that gets transmitted back and forth allows for this vulnerability. And as the world becomes more dependent on smart farming, the more serious the concern gets. Because if these smart devices were to be destroyed, or if there was an attack made that disrupted the production of the crops or affected the herds, the livestock, it could be really detrimental to society, really detrimental to people, their lives. And it really comes down to really people's lives could be at stake, which I find quite concerning, because the amount of manpower that it took to harvest a number of crops traditionally, before we even had machinery, there was quite a bit. But once we have all these interconnected devices that are assisting farmers, they can produce so much more output. But if all the output stops, there's still that high demand that's required to feed all of these people. And suddenly there's food shortages that can happen. And if something like this were to happen, let's say a number of companies were attacked by something as simple as a distributed denial of service attack, and it brought down a significant amount of these IoT devices, not only would the developed world be rather affected with food shortages, but those who would be affected likely the most is the underdeveloped world as well. And as we had mentioned before about the security of these devices, it's very scary. Many of them are connected through SSH or Telnet. So if you want to get access to device SSH or Telnet, and these login interfaces have weak security, there's minimal to no authentication. So there's sometimes just not authentication at all. And you have and hackers have this very easy way of getting access to these devices, as was mentioned earlier. So because the farming sector is so critical to just human life in general, the importance of security is increased even more in these critical sectors. And it's not just farming either. There's other critical sectors that are equally as important, like the energy grid. Data loss through these security breaches as well, even if the device itself isn't affected in the sense of destroying crops, data theft can lead to companies not being trusted anymore by their consumers. And because of that, when consumers lose trust in their companies, it can lead to companies going out of business, which can also affect food supply chains. It's simple, sorry. So a really interesting fact was that the global population is approaching 8.5 billion by the end of the decade. And the number of people that are currently getting affected by world hunger is climbing up to about 840 million. One of the great things about smart farms is that they have the capacity, or you could say the potential and very real possibility to end world hunger. If this was something that was implemented over time in the next 10 years, it is a very real possibility that enough food production could solve this issue, which is another reason why it's just so equally important that these devices need to be secured. And when it comes to security, it doesn't start with getting a data breach and then realizing, oh, we need to implement security. It really starts from the design of the IoT device itself. Security needs to be from design to production. And by doing that, companies have the very real ability to make the world a better place. And they are affecting the lives of other human beings just by ensuring that these critical sectors are reasonably, at the very least, secured, more so than they are now, which is frightening. So
it's definitely a very scary prospect there.
It is, but there's positives to be had. You know, if security does become more of a concern, and there's not just CEOs saying, "Oh, okay, once we get a data breach, then we'll worry about it." The more where this happens, where it's starting from the design, things will get better, and we're already starting to see that trend. So there's a positive, there's a silver lining to it all.
Nice. Would you say that with these advent of smart farming and being open to attacks, that could open the way for state-based warfare,
100%.
targeting like food infrastructure?
Yeah, it's very scary. If you could affect the production level of a country while you're at war with them, or even before you go to war, if people don't have food, they're not going to be able to fight. And I'm not saying, you know, we don't want to get into world issues and IoT.
Sure, yeah.
But you know, it's a very real way of attacking someone.
Oh, absolutely.
It's scary. Yeah. So that is my my overview of agriculture. I did a lot more research on the general aspect of things, but I want to let's save some room for Jack. So we can cover that topic.
Fair enough.
On the data security?
Yes. So I will turn the meeting over to you so you can give us a bit more information on data security.
All right. So basically, as we all know from the beginning of this podcast, IoT is increasingly becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. The biggest problem that we all have or still have is securing our data because they're not always encrypted. You can spot it very easily. And if people with malicious intent gets access to that data, then you're basically screwed.
You're not wrong.
Right? So basically, as I've researched, I've noticed that IoT and like our traditional devices, like our smartphones, our laptops, like every other thing we use on a daily basis, they focus on two different areas. Our laptops, our phones, our normal computers are more focused on like protecting our privacy, whereas IoT devices are more focused on preventing access, as what you guys have basically described earlier. It's like preventing them from being easily accessed, prevent them from being taken over. And to do so, we would have to naturally protect them at their source. So like when we create the devices, we make sure they're much harder to crack, make sure they're much safer for the end user. The other ones I would include is making sure the user that uses it is not a security risk, right? Because every security breach, it's either software or hardware, or it's the end user because they're not properly trained to deal with those situations. And then that's pretty much it for data security, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you protect the individual, you protect the device, and then you would end up protecting the end product for data security.
100%. Yeah, there's a lot of training that needs to go. That's involved not only with training the consumer to know what are the best security practices, but also training the people who are working on the project.
Yeah.
Like you said, Ryan, the security needs to start when you manufacture the device, when you design the device.
Yeah. It starts from the design to the distribution, and then the end user has to have some at least basic form of security knowledge. Say like Kai said, don't use the default password. Don't use the default username. Change those to at least something that's not found in a database like RockU or whatever the other pwned sites are.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, just don't use a basic password. Don't use it.
Exactly. Like that's just all it comes down to. It's just common sense.
Yeah, so when we were talking about mitigation, there's quite a few things that can be done. We have frequently updating devices with security patches, training both the the people that use the devices and the people that are creating them.
Yeah.
And also there's some other things that can be implemented. I did do a little research on this thing called PKI, which I thought was really cool, which is a way of encrypting and decrypting private messages, which is early. Something someone mentioned earlier. I think it might have been Kai. There's a plenty of ways that devices can be secured, and with that focus on security, we can see definitely an improvement in things in the future.
Yeah.
I would like to check with you if you are aware of any industrial standard for IoT security during our research.
I couldn't really find any. As far as I'm aware, that seems to be one of the main problems, is there is no standard.
I think this is a major problem.
Yeah, they're just all over the place. Each thing has like their own little security, and each one uses its own. There's no like standardized format that I could find.
Yeah, the only standard I found is for the payment card industry, the PCI DSS, the payment card industry data security standard. And I found that some consultant suggest that yes, there is low IoT standard security standard for IoT device, but they would recommend that we can read some sessions from PCI DSS, which it would help for some security. I have read some, but the content is what we have discussed before. The first one is change the default password and username.
Please do though.
Yeah, that's
Cannot
just a
stress this enough.
reoccurring idea we keep coming back to. Is stop using default.
Yeah. Another is manufacturers should enforce changing the default password before the device can be used.
Mm-hmm.
Another is manufacturers should provide security hardening setting using secure encryption technology, develop security applications. Yeah, they're very obvious. The capability for the IoT device to update after it has been sold, so they can have a live update, and the update channel should be secure. So they need to verify the software is provided by the manufacturer, but not provided by the hackers, so that they download the malware instead of the update patch. Yeah, such solution. Yeah, we already discussed, but they are also mentioned in the PCI DSS standard.
Mm-hmm. Sure, this could be the birth of the security encryption standard here.
Right here.
Could be.
Now we have the security standard. But yeah, it would be actually pretty cool to actually do something like that.
That would be.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we probably touched on most of the topics that we need to today.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Great. Awesome.
What would you say is the moral that we should take away from this whole thing that we've done today?
I would like to introduce another interesting thing.
For sure.
In Metasploit, I found something helpful for IoT security. I think Metasploit is already supporting pen testing for IoT device.
Oh.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Let me try to share my screen.
Yeah, you should be able to share it.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah, maybe a little bit small. Okay.
No, it's fine.
So I can search, for example, garage. Yeah, you can see there is a brute force garage door password, for example.
Oh no!
Oh no! No, not like this. No.
So if we say, yeah, Cole, do you have a garage door?
I do have a garage door. Yes, I don't want that's internet access.
Oh no, that is a lot of. Oh no.
Yeah, this is for camera. There's lots of IP camera password disclosures. Yeah. So at least we have some tools for pen testing IoT security.
This is true. Yeah. This is just scary to see that this
right?
is already,
this is terrifying.
You can talk about it.
This widespread. Already.
Exactly. You can talk about it, but then as soon as you see it in action, you're like, wow, no, this is real. Yeah.
Great. Now I'm even more terrified of all the cameras and stuff around the house. Like,
100%. Awesome. Well, thank you for showing us that, Kai.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. If anyone else would like to add anything additional, this would be a great time. I think this is
Don't use default passwords.
Don't use default passwords.
Big moral of this whole podcast: just change your password and don't do anything not common sense.
Exactly.
100%. And even just as a consumer or someone who's watching this video, maybe you're interested in security or not, just taking some precautionary steps to find out what you can do to secure your own IoT devices is...
Everything starts with you.
Exactly, 100%.
It starts and ends.
Yeah. So thank you all for joining us on the podcast today and tuning in and listening. And I think that about wraps it up.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Have a
Drop
good
a
one.
like.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Yeah, oh,
Exactly.
Ring that bell.
Ring that bell.
This is going on.
Yeah, no, it's going on mine.
Smash that subscribe button.
All right.
All right.
Have a good one.
Cheers.